If you're thinking about a certain subject, it can be quite easy to get stuck in a loop. And this is where what I call thought acupuncture can be really useful. You can represent your ideas as a network, where the concepts are the nodes and the relations are the connections, and you build a graph. This is exactly what you do in acupuncture, where you represent the body as a network. Once you have this representation, you can see the structure of how things are connected in your thought network or in your body network. You can see the patterns they form and the main meridians. So this is where the energy or the information flows. This representation helps you make a diagnosis. You can identify whether there is too much imbalance, for example, on certain clusters, on certain parts of the system, and whether you might want to shift your attention to the smaller clusters, the less represented ones. And this is exactly what you would also do in acupuncture by applying pressure to those points which are underrepresented in order to activate the energy flow and to shift imbalance into the more equal direction and balance it out. And this is exactly also what you can do inside this tool, Infranodos, that I built for thought acupuncture that I'm showing you right now. And so once you do that, once you shift your attention to those clusters, you activate them, you can either think of the connections between all those different elements yourself, or you can also generate an idea using the built-in AI, so that will activate the connections between all those disjointed clusters. And then when you add into the graph, then it will equalize the system and move the focus from the most prominent cluster here to the less represented ones. And once you do it in a few iterations, this is the sort of therapy process for your thinking or for the text. So if you're interested to see how that works, let me demonstrate step by step. In fact, on the website of Infranodos, we have a whole page on thought acupuncture, so you can read about it in more detail. I will leave a link in the description to the video below. And I will basically take you through this text and show you the analogies between acupuncture, how acupuncture works, and how you can apply absolutely the same methodology to your thinking using knowledge graphs. So here we actually have a representation of acupuncture, how that works. You have the layer of the skin, then you put the needles inside certain special points, the acupoints they're called, and they activate so-called acupoint network. You see the network of interrelated connections there. Then this acupoint network activates the meridian network, the larger network in the body. The impulses go into your limbic, paralimbic, neocortical system, so in your brain, and it basically calms you down. It diminishes activity in the regions of the brain that are responsible for alertness, thinking, attention, and kind of activates activity in the systems that are responsible for rest and relaxation. And then these systems, they activate the nerve endocrine immune network in the body. So through the brain, it goes back into the body. It activates certain elements of that network, which will then act on certain parts of the system where you find imbalance and activate the connections in your brain, in your system, that will then activate these organs and have a therapeutic effect on the condition or on the organs that you want to affect with this acupuncture system. So this is kind of how it works in a nutshell. There is actually lots of research on the subject. We have links to that research in that article, so you can read it. It's all peer-reviewed articles and verified by science. So it's not made up, and it's actually a pretty amazing system because you're activating certain networks in the body by applying pressure to some points on the surface. It's very amazing. And so if you apply that same approach as an analogy to our thinking, you can actually represent it in a similar way. You have a structure of thought. So first maybe it's just disjointed ideas. Then you connect them together in a knowledge graph. So this is exactly what we have here at this stage. You see we have a representation of ideas here. They're represented as a network. This is our knowledge graph. Directly, this representation helps us see the structure. So we can see also if there is any imbalance in network. And in fact, Infranodos shows you here that the discourse structure is biased because it is too much focused on these two central nodes, network and the body. And if you go to the topics view, you see that it's too much focused on body network, 49% influence here. So there's too much attention on these concepts, and this text could benefit if we diversify it a little bit. If we activate the latent topical structure here, this triangle here, of the concepts which are highlighted here. When you click on the highlighted nodes, you see that there is this superstructure around the central concepts that we could actually activate. So this is exactly this part here where we identify hubs and clusters, diagnose the state. So in our case, it was biased here, right? We identified it's biased, and then we understand which clusters or nodes we need to activate. In that case, which clusters or nodes we need to put our attention to. If we're on the concepts view, it's those clusters here. If we're on the topical view, it's those less represented clusters here. And then once we apply attention there, we harmonize the connection because we bring more informational flow into these less represented nodes, clusters, connections. We bridge these gaps, right? And this is supposed to have also a therapeutic effect on your discourse because it will shift it from this biased state into the more diversified state. And I will demonstrate to you how it works using a real example of a text that I wrote that I want to optimize using this approach. So you will see exactly all the interface elements that you can use in order to do that. So here, in fact, I have a text that I published on polysingularity.com, my blog, which is a text on network as a body. So this is kind of like a philosophical essay on a certain topic. And this is this essay visualized as a knowledge graph inside Infranodus. And directly when I visualize it like this, I can see that there is too much focus on body network cluster, too much focus if I click on the concepts view on network body. And I can see that the discourse structure is biased. And so my task here is to make this structure more diversified. I need to focus on the less represented ideas, which I have highlighted here. You see there is this new highlight mode. And if I hover with my mouse over it, it shows me the super network that I can create by connecting those less represented nodes. In fact, they're shown here. They're called conceptual gateways. These are the concepts that have high influence, but low number of connections. So they're really easy to approach. If you think of a text network as a social network, those are the people who know maybe less people, but the people they know are important and belong to a lot of different communities. So they're like super connectors, but they're underrepresented. So we need to focus our attention on them in order to activate this structure. If you switch to the topical view, it's the same thing. You see we have this body network cluster as the main one, but then there are smaller ones. There's a triad of those clusters here: central structure, city connection, and vector space, so the less represented ones, and I can focus on them in order to represent them further. Let me show you how this approach works using a completely new graph. So here I have a representation of this text as a network, and I'm on the topical view because this is more of a high-level overview of the main ideas. Infranodus shows me that the structure of this discourse is biased, so then it means it's too much focused on this body network cluster here that takes too much attention, and directly when I hover over the highlighted nodes here, highlighted clusters, I can see that it proposes me to make connections between these less represented ones. I can highlight them in the network, so these are the city connection, cluster gap, and dimensional space clusters, and then I can go into the built-in AI and ask Infranodus to generate maybe a response, an idea, or some kind of statement that would help me develop them further. So for example, I will choose an idea. I click an idea, and then Infranodus generates a new idea that links those three less represented clusters together. Then it means more attention onto these clusters, so that helps me give more attention to cluster gaps, city connections, and dimensional space. So here, for example, it tells me that I could build a vector bridge atlas for cities and text. It maps disconnected urban enclaves as clusters in multidimensional space, and then uses switch-like gateways to reveal semantic and physical gaps where new bridges of communication, electricity, or meaning would most increase circulation beyond current limits. So it's kind of like how you could develop a city using a network structure. Not just build bridges, but maybe understand where these bridges need to be built in the first place. And then if I add this into the graph, I click this button here, it helps me add more ideas into the structure. You see, so these clusters are more connected now, and then I can focus on a new triad of less disconnected clusters that it shows me here. So for example, here again it highlights central structure, dimensional space, disconnected cities. Again, I can click on this triad of clusters here, then on this button here, and then I can ask it, okay, so now generate another idea that would maybe bridge them in a more interesting way, and then add it again into the graph. And then again, the structure is improved more and more because I'm giving more and more attention to those less represented clusters. So when I do it in a few iterations, naturally, I will generate a lot of text and ideas that will cover those less represented clusters here: structural balance, disconnected cities, bridge gaps. You see, it's kind of always focusing on the smaller clusters when I'm in this biased state. And the more content I add that connects these different clusters together, the more information will flow through these new pathways. And then this text will kind of shift the balance from these body network clusters that now overtakes over the rest to the less represented ones. You can also do it on the concepts view here. So when you click on the concepts view, you also have these highlighted nodes here. And if you hover over them, you can actually do it exactly the same way. You highlight those nodes, and then you ask Infranodus to generate an idea that would link them together. So you click here, and then you say, okay, so these selected nodes, now I would like to generate an idea that would link them together. And these are the nodes that are underrepresented in this text. So if I generate an idea that links them together, I will make sure that they will start to have more weight, and then the balance of power will shift from network body towards these less represented clusters. And I can do it again in a few iterations, generate a few ideas that would then sort of bridge these less represented clusters together in more interesting ways. You see, add more and more ideas, and so on. And gradually, again, this will allow me to move focus from this network body to other concepts that will start to have more and more weight. So this would be another approach to work on the level of concepts, not on the high level view of the topics, but on the more granular view of the concepts. Then you have the gaps. Gaps is also interesting because these are the structural gaps that Infranodus identifies in your text, and then it proposes you to make connections between them. So you can choose one of them, and then exactly the same way you can generate ideas that bridge these gaps, and then you add them into the graph. These connections get equalized, and so more and more focus and attention will actually flow to these less represented clusters. And gradually you will optimize the structure and make sure that there is more focus on these gaps, on these clusters that are less represented, but that are more important to optimizing this discourse and make it diverse more and more. So once I run it a few iterations, I want to show you what it comes to. So for example, now I will go again on the level of topics, of concepts. I will click some of these concepts again, add a few more ideas, and then you see now my text shifted from bias to focus. So now it's not anymore biased on one idea, it's focused, but it's much more diverse. And so this allowed me to shift the structure of that system from something that was really biased on one particular topic. Now, while there is still a lot of focus on network as a body, I have other topical clusters that are much more represented here, other concepts that have much more attention on them, and once I do it in a few more iterations, it will gradually shift to diverse state. And what's great about Infranodus is that if your text, for example, was dispersed at the beginning, so then the objective here is not too much to diversify, but to rather connect it, then it would highlight the clusters that you should focus on if you want to connect ideas better. So this would be an approach that is completely opposite in its direction. But what I'm saying is that, in fact, this diagnostical part where you identify the structure helps you see in which direction you should move. And then Infranodus will highlight for you the different concepts and topics you should connect in order to optimize the structure of your text and make it more diversified eventually. So I hope you like this demonstration. Let me know what you think about it. Try it out with your own text, with your own writing, with your notes, with your ideas. You can also use it on existing discourses. It's actually pretty interesting because it always helps you find the parts that are missing and to shift your attention to the frequently overlooked part. So if you're doing research, you can also do it for Google search results, for research paper search results, and that will help you find ideas that you wouldn't otherwise have. Thank you.